Hi, my name is Kevin Coleman. I'm a kite maker living in Grimsby, Ontario, which is on the shore of Lake Ontario, not very far from Niagara Falls. And this is the first of three videos I'm making on making an applique to put on a kite. I should say that I'm not a professional kite maker. I pretty much make my kites in the space that you can see here in the background. So there's nothing in here which is not achievable for anyone wanting to start out or try making kites as the beginning of a hobby. This is a summary of the steps that I use in making these kites. You can see here an example of one of the appliques that I'm talking about. It's a method known as the stained glass method, where the figure is outlined in these solid black lines, and then the color in between is done by sewing in pieces of different color fabric. Okay. So this is the process I use. It's not the only process. When I first started doing this, I used a completely different method, and I'm sure I'll learn more methods as I go on. But this at least is an achievable method you can use. It's one way of doing it. It's one way of doing it, and it will produce this sort of a result. Okay. Today we're going to talk about the first 6 steps in this process. In the second video, I'll go on to talk about the process of actually cutting the fabric and laying it up ready for sewing, and in the third one I'll go through my approach to sewing the applique all together. Here's a set of the tools that you need to complete the entire project. So I think you can make the entire applique project with this basic set of tools. Today we're only going to use the first 5 in the list. Absolutely, you'll need a computer. It's not shown here, but maybe you can infer it from the presentation here. But we'll need a computer that's running Adobe Acrobat Reader software. Adobe Acrobat is a free software. You can download it for free from adobe.com. If it may already be on your computer. Most computers come with Adobe Acrobat Reader already installed. If not, make sure you download from adobeacrobat.com or adobe.com directly. Don't use a third-party downloading service, as they may bundle other things with it. We also need a printer and any standard paper. I use just the standard printer paper I get from Office Depot or Staples, and it can be letter size, or if you're in another part of the world, it can be A4. You just want any basic standard paper will work. We need the Scotch Magic Brand tape, a Sharpie black marker with a fine tip. If it says fine tip, it produces a line which is almost 1/8 of an inch wide. It produces a kind of a nice thick black line. We'll use that for touching up any lines on the template. And then we need scissors for cutting paper. Notice there's 2 pairs of scissors in the pictures. The middle ones are my kitchen scissors I use for cutting up the paper, and the bottom pair are my fabric scissors, which are never used for anything except cutting fabric. Okay. The image we're going to use is this image that I found on Pinterest. It's one of the Lego Ninjago characters. This one's name is Kai, which is the same name as my grandson. I'm actually going to do a series of these. There's 4 different characters, so I thought I might make a kite for each one. Because kids like them. They all recognize them, they know them, so they're kind of fun. Okay. Notice that this line has very clean, strong black lines. Whatever picture you use, whether it's one you've drawn yourself or one you found somewhere, make sure you have nice, clear black lines, because these black lines will actually turn out to be exactly the lines that go on the final kite. If you've got a color picture, you can use a color picture, no, nothing wrong with that, but I highly recommend that you take an eraser in one of the video applications and erase as much of the color as you can easily do. Doesn't matter if you leave some color in the corners or if there's some along the lines, but if you're going to print this out very large, you're going to print very large areas of color, it'll use up all your printer ink, and in the end you're just going to cut it out and throw it away. So you might as well, just from an economic point of view, delete the color before you start. We need to know how large we want the figure to be. So my practice is always to kind of paste it up on my computer against the outline of a finished kite. But you don't have to do that. You can, if you just know in your head how big it is, or if you sketch it out on a pad with a pencil, or you, whatever method you want, just figure out what the height of your final applique will be. Now, of course, if your applique is more wide than tall, just take everything I say, but do it for the width instead of the height. The same method will work. Just make sure you figure out which is the dominant dimension that you want to scale to. Okay. My goal in this particular applique was to make it 42 inches tall. Once we have our image, we save it as a PDF file. I haven't shown that step because there's at least 27 ways to make a PDF file. But whatever it is, whether you save it as a PDF, or you print the PDF on some computers, whether you export it to a PDF, whatever you do, you need to end up with a PDF file. Can be a PDF of a photograph, can be a PDF from a drawing. Just get it to be a PDF file. If you're not sure about that step, find a 12-year-old and ask them to step you through it. I'm sure any of them will be able to help you. And then we open up the picture in Adobe Acrobat. Adobe Acrobat's a PDF management tool. When we open it up, we just have a look at it. We can adjust the zoom if we want to. That just shows how big it is on the screen, doesn't affect anything else, so that we can see the whole picture. And we make sure this is the picture that we want to be the final applique. Just make sure we haven't picked up the wrong file. The next step, still in Adobe Acrobat, is to actually print out a reference sheet, a reference copy. So this copy is going to be printed out on just one piece of paper. Now when we print it out, make sure it's critical that you set this to be actual size, or if you have a scaling option, you set it to be 100%. Either one will get you the same result. We really want the final output of this printing step to be accurate for the size of the image in its natural state. Having done that, we can measure that image. So we actually measure on that piece of paper how big did the image print out. In my case, it printed 10 inches tall when I measured it with a ruler. And I know that I want it to be 42 inches tall when I finish, so I can calculate my scaling factor. The scaling factor is just the height you want to end up with divided by the height you're starting with, multiplied by 100%. So in my case, I got 420%. Just as a quick check, if you're making it bigger, it'll always be more than 100%. If you're making it smaller, it'll be less than 100%. So just to make sure you don't get the two numbers backwards in the calculation. Knowing that, we still in Adobe Acrobat, we print it again, but this time we select the poster print, and then we put the scaling factor in here. You can see I put my 420% in. We set the overlap. We can leave it like this. This is almost 0, but if it comes up to anything more than that, we set it to 0. Or in this case, I could have set it to 0. We don't want any overlap. We're going to rely on actually mating up the two edges of the black lines wherever they cross between pages. I strongly suggest that you do not turn on cut marks or labels. If you do that, then the program will print out a whole lot of extra blank pages, and they'll just confuse everything as well as wasting paper. We don't use the cut marks, we don't need them. We're going to rely on trimming the paper just to where the black lines cross between pages. And you'll see that in the live demo at the end. So we print that out. When we do that, we'll get a stack of pages. What I like to do then is lay them out on the floor just to check the order of them and to check that I've got them all, and also to have a look at how big this image is going to turn out to be. So here you can see my pages all laid out on the floor. And you can actually kind of make it out. You can't line them up perfectly. Don't bother trying. There's no value in it. You can see there that there's this 1/4 inch left at the edge of every page, so it'll always get in the way of trying to line the lines up. But just put them out there so you get an idea of what's happening. We then stack them up, and we stack them up in order where the top left sheet is on the top and the bottom right sheet is on the bottom, and they're organized by rows in between. Okay, and then we're all ready to do the taping step. Just before I show you that and demonstrate it, let's just look briefly at the pattern of taping that we're going to use. So the template is taped with pieces of tape, not long tape. You don't need to tape the whole seam. You just need a piece maybe 1.5 inches long. You want it as a minimum to have one at the center of each overlap, and then you also want to have one which goes across wherever the 4 pages join together. Now, in addition, you want to make sure you have at least a piece of tape that covers up wherever black lines cross between 2 pages, so when we cut it out later on, you never have ends flopping where the black lines cross. And at the very end, we'll cut out the template with a margin, and then what you'll do then is tape wherever there's 2 pages meet around the edges, so make sure the edges are all contained. What we don't want to have anywhere is any loose corners or loose edges that could snag or get caught later on in the process. When we finish that, we'll flip it over and do exactly the same thing on the back side. So let's watch now as we go through the entire process. This is much sped up. It's sped up to 20 times normal time. Takes a couple of minutes on here, so probably takes about 40 minutes to an hour to actually do this in normal time. Now we're going to see this being done in practice. You can see here that we're actually trimming and taping each of the pages in place. Notice that the trimming is always done only on the top and the left side of each page. Never trim the bottom or the right hand side. That way you'll always get consistent overlaps. Notice also that the trimming is being done accurately where the black lines cross the end of the page, and then the rest of it, sometimes it's not even trimmed. It's just left to overlap. Okay, so you only worry about just trimming accurately to the ends of the black lines, otherwise leave as much overlap as you can. Okay, continuing on here, you see it's getting almost done. Now this is being run at 20 times normal speed, so you can see it takes about 2 minutes. It takes about 40 minutes to do this whole thing. It's not a huge time. Now we're finished. Now we're going to trim. See, leaving about 2 to 3 inches all around. We'll need that for stability later on when we do the next step. You see taping all around the edges, and now we've flipped it over and we're doing a full taping all of the back. Okay, and at the end of that, we end up with a remarkably strong kite. Now you can see we're going to take the Sharpie and we're going to actually touch up the lines. Now I must admit, when I made this video, the first time I touched up the lines, I forgot to record it. So now I'm demonstrating how you would touch up the lines. But what I'm doing is looking for any places where there's gaps. For example, that line that they're doing just now didn't exist before, it didn't fill in. This line was too skinny to be able to be sewn, so I've made it a bit fatter there. And I've closed up a couple of other places where I don't really want to have too many orphan pieces of black. I like the black to be all connected so that it's anchored in some way. So now there's the template all ready for use, all ready to go on to the next section. Now as we close out this video, we've gone through all the steps for making a full-size template, and just to show you where it ends up, here's a picture of a finished kite with exactly that template, fully executed, all cut out, sewn, and sewn to the kite sail. So that's where we're heading for. Okay. So I'll see you on the next video.